So let's talk about some airbrushing basics. I'm going to be talking specifically about the Cookie Countess airbrush machine and Cookie Countess airbrush colors, but a lot of what I say still applies to other brands of airbrush machines and airbrush colors. The Cookie Countess airbrush machine is a single action airbrush gun, and let me explain what that means. When you turn on our airbrush machine, the compressor will constantly run. Air is always coming out of the gun. Color doesn't come out until you pull back on your trigger, and you can hear the difference. There's nothing in here now, but color would come out. With the dual action gun, the compressor does not run consistently or constantly, and your air only will start flowing when you press down on your gun, and your gun may look a little different from this too, but you'll have to press down and pull back. So guns for single action and dual action airbrush machines are not interchangeable, so just know that. If you put a dual action gun on our machine, it's going to eventually break the compressor. So we obviously don't advise that. So just be sure you know which type of gun you have. So airbrush machine, Cookie Countess, single action gun. Again, your power switch is here. This knob is going to control your PSI. So that's your air pressure, and that's how much air is pushing through here. As I said in our other video, I tend to keep mine on high at all times. I find this works best for me, and I take more of my control in my trigger here. Color goes in the well here. I'm going to use our Cookie Countess airbrush color today in the demos. This is a water-based, airbrush-specific food color. So you can use this on royal icing, on fondant, on buttercream, especially crusted buttercream will work great on. The only thing you can't use this on is chocolate. The water, if you know water and chocolate, do not mix. So if you try to airbrush like chocolate covered Oreos with a water-based product, it will beat up or stay tacky. So this is not recommended for that. We recommend you only use airbrush specific products in your airbrush machine. Other brands make an airbrush color. You can use any brand of airbrush color in a Cookie Countess airbrush machine and vice versa. But be sure that you're not using gel color in your gun. It's much thicker. Even if you thin it out with some alcohol or extract, it's still not going to be the same. It's going to usually remain tacky on your cookie, I find also, so I don't recommend it. If you are going to use a dust, such as a Roxy Enrich Luster Dust, you can airbrush with these. You do just have to be careful though that like for Roxy Enrich, you want to be using the luster dust, not the sparkle dust. The sparkle dust needs a larger needle size, which this gun does not come with, for the larger sparkle particles to go through. You can mix a luster dust with an alcohol or an extract and put it through your airbrush machine. I don't have a specific ratio on what that looks like, so I recommend that you maybe experiment a little bit with your ratio of liquid to powder, and make sure you don't try to push anything too thick through your gun. You're going to end up clogging it. And I would also make sure you don't let this dry out in your gun, because you'll be left with just the powder in your gun, which you don't want. So the easiest thing to do is to just use an airbrush based color. You don't need to thin these out at all. You use these straight from the bottle. So to add your color, you're just going to add it right in the well here. These have an easy drip top, so we can add a few drops in here. And then when you turn your machine on, don't be afraid the color's not going to come out. Like I said, it won't come out until you start pulling back. Okay. When you first get your machine, it's a great idea to just experiment on a piece of paper towel like this and see how it feels. When you get close and pull back a little, you can do lines. If you get close and pull back a lot, that's when you're going to end up with a little bit too much color, too much saturation. If you're on royal icing, this will not get absorbed quickly and will end up looking splotchy. If you stay way up here and you airbrush, that's when you're going to get like full coverage. If you're covering an entire cookie with an airbrush color, you want to back off a little bit. So get to know how it sprays and the best way that you're going to use it for what you're doing. It might be different depending on what you're using, what you're doing, and what your end result is. So let's talk about how to cover an entire cookie with airbrush color next. Something that I like to do a lot of, actually almost exclusively, is I will always just flood my cookies in white, and then I'll airbrush my base color. And you obviously don't have to do this. One of the reasons I do it is because it saves me time on mixing icing colors. Also, it lets me use like a whole background of a shimmer color. For example, this is the rose gold. So let's say you want to do this and you have a white cookie that you want to airbrush the whole background a color. One handy tool that we do sell is we sell these little mini silicone non-slip mats, and we sell these little turntables that all kind of match together and line up. And this is something you can do, so if you want to spin your cookie and not touch it, the turntable is great. This is great for piping too. For airbrushing, so if I want to change this color to pink, what I'm going to do is I'm going to still aim down at the cookie like I would stenciling pretty much. I'm not going to get too close because I want the color to be even. And I'm just going to start at one side and start making my way across the cookie. You notice that even if I want this to be a darker pink, I'm not going to try to do it all at once. So I'm going to go back in the other direction. Even just letting the color set up for 10 seconds can be beneficial. Now if I want to keep going, I can make this a little bit darker. I can add another layer. So as you can see right now, it's a pretty bright pink. The color is even. It's not splotchy looking because I wasn't too close and I wasn't trying to do too much at once. If I want to shade these edges, what I'll do is now I'll get a little bit closer, and I'm only pulling this back a little bit. I really want to point that out. And then I'm aiming, and you'll get a feel for aiming this. I think my cookie thing is vibrating on the machine. Sorry about that. But as I spin, I can grab the edges of the shape here. So this is a V, obviously. I had some letters left over from Valentine's Day. I was making the cookies that said love. So now I haven't really shaded it yet, but I have gotten the outside edges pink. If you really want to shade it, you can get in a little bit closer and open up the gun a little bit more and add that almost shading shadow to the edge. So let's see, let me just show you, for example. All right, here's our V. I don't know if you can see, but this side is a little bit shaded, this side isn't. So it might, looks like it has a little bit more depth. So that's something really fun that you can do with airbrushing. So again, why would I do this as opposed to just using pink icing? Well, maybe I only needed a little bit of pink icing and I didn't want to make a whole tub of pink icing and load more bags or more bottles. Or maybe this is the color I want and I don't know how to get this with the icing colors I have. I know that I want this hot pink. So there's different reasons you might do this. This is a great way, like I said, to save yourself a little time and maybe just airbrush your base colors. So I'm just going to finish that shading just a little bit. Now let me show you what's going to happen if I don't take my time on layering up this color to make a solid color. So I'm going to put that aside for a second. And I'm going to grab an E. Like I said, I had some love cookies. Actually, let's move this out of the way so I don't get it with color. Now, a mistake I see a lot of people make is they try to oversaturate the color because they want it to be that dark pink, but they try to get it on the first shot. So if I get too close and open my gun too much, okay. Now I got the color I wanted really fast, but let me show you. if you're getting these little, oops, sorry, these little blotchy colors, that is because the air is coming at it too quickly. The color's coming on too fast. It's not getting a chance to dry at all before the layer comes on. And the air is actually pushing the still wet airbrush color out of the way. So if you're getting a lot of splotchiness like that, oops, I just dinged it. You're too close and putting too much color down at once. This is also going to take a lot longer to dry because of the amount of color. This is pretty much almost dry at this point. Whereas this, I bet I can come back in 10 minutes and it still actually won't be dry. So keep that in mind also. Another common problem that I get emails about is my color doesn't look even. It looks kind of not splotchy, but it just doesn't look like it has good coverage. It might be because if your machine's all the way on low, or if you have a moisture trap on your machine, which quite frankly I don't really recommend using unless you really need it and you're in a really humid environment. They can cause sometimes more trouble than they're worth. But if your machine's on low, this machine goes very low. If you have it all the way on low, and then when you pull back, not a lot of color is gonna actually come out. And see how you get that splatter? Because there's just not enough air pushing the color out. So even if we, keep spraying and we pull back on this trigger all the way, it's still gonna kind of come out pixely. Now, this is kind of a cool look if this is what you want. That's how you're gonna do it. Maybe you want it to look like grass or moss. But if you're looking for that full coverage like we were using in the beginning, you're definitely going to want to turn up your machine. And it's the same color. There's nothing different about it. It's just you want that air pressure that's going to push the color out faster and not allow it to kind of get like particles like that. So if I go back and do the same thing I did the first time, again, I'm back a little bit, but I'm using even strokes, but again, my machine's on high. I'm not too close so I don't get those little air pockets. But you're gonna get a much more even coverage than you would with the machine on low. So if you're getting a look like this, try turning your machine pressure up higher. So let's start talking about stenciling. And first I want to talk about how are you going to hold your stencil in place? Well, you can try to just hold it with one hand while you airbrush with the other hand, but eventually you might find that you kind of need something else that's going to help you out. So the first thing I want to talk about is the Stencil Genie. This is made by Genie Products, or the Creative Cookier. The Stencil Genie is a 2-piece magnetic frame that will fit. Your stencil has to be at least a 5.5 by 5.5 size. So, and if you see the side here, it has 2 different thicknesses depending on which way you flip it. So there's one side that's basically a 1/4 inch, the other side is 3/8. So it depends on what kind of cookie you're using. You're just going to open up the frame, lay your stencil inside, making sure that all 4 corners are straight, and snap that back on. This will go right over your cookie. Now this is on the thicker side right now because this is a 1/4 inch cookie and it's iced. It's still pretty much going to touch the bottom. If I were to use it on the 1/4 inch side, it is going to kind of hang out a little bit and not touch the surface. So you're going to just have to figure out what side works better for you. And then obviously you can turn this if you want. You don't have to always use it straight, but your stencil has to be straight in the Genie. Okay. Another product on the market for holding your stencil is the Stencil Snap from Sweet Sugar Belle. So this works similarly with magnets and a square frame, except this frame is adjustable. And it has numbers, so you can make this smaller or bigger, this opening. So all these pieces come apart, oops, and It also has two different thicknesses. So this is an adjustable frame to hold your stencil. Another way you can hold your stencil in place is with magnets. We do sell these on our website. We sell them by the dozen. And the idea here is that if you stack two magnets together, you're going to be at right around the right height for a cookie, iced cookie. So your stencil will be pretty even with your cookie. I'm working on a cookie sheet here too. So my magnets are actually sticking to my cookie sheet. So the bottom part of my magnets will stay to the sheet, and then I'll place my stencil on top and just drop in the last 4 magnets. Then when you want to remove it, you can just pull off a couple, peel this back. If you're going to stencil again, you can just simply take the cookie out, put another cookie back in, do your next cookie. One advantage over using a magnet is if you have a stencil that's off-centered and maybe you need to place the cookie a little bit differently. Let's say, for example, we're using this little It's a Boy stencil, but we want to put the It's a Boy down at the bottom. Because the cookie would go past the frame of, say, the genie, I might want to use these magnets this way. So that way I can move the stencil to wherever I want. Just be sure you don't airbrush if you're airbrushing over this part that's still exposed. Something else you can do is use an adapter set, which I'll show you next. So we sell these stencil adapter sets, and basically what they're going to do is adapt your stencil of a strange size or placement onto a stencil genie if you still want to use your stencil genie. Our adapter set comes with 5 different shapes, and you get 2 pieces of each shape. So it's actually 10 stencil pieces kind of in one. And basically what it's going to let you do is, like, let's say you have a stencil like this. This is one of our conversation heart stencils where, you know, the design is not centered on the stencil, basically so we can fit more on a stencil so we won't have to sell as many stencils for you guys. But if you wanted to center this on the cookie, you obviously can't use a stencil genie because of where it's going to be placed on the cookie. So what you can do is take one of your adapter pieces. This is the 2-inch square. Put one piece down. Now you're going to sandwich in your stencil that you want to use in between these other adapter pieces. And then you're going to put your frame back on top again. So now basically the part that we want is centered in the adapter. So now we can still use our genie with our cookie and with this kind of stencil. And this also works well if you have a small round stencil but you want to use your genie with that. Next, let's talk about what we are stenciling onto. So these are sugar cookies that have been flooded with royal icing. Obviously, this royal icing has been allowed to dry, and this is dried completely. Even if it's just crusted over, you still really need to be careful. You could, by handling it, you could easily crush this. It may not hold the color the same if it's not dry. So I generally would let my cookies dry maybe 8 hours or overnight before I start airbrushing, or unless you're using a dehydrator, then you can get to them a little bit quicker. But the main thing I want to point out is that your cookie surface really needs to be as flat as possible to get the best airbrushing results. So if I hold this to the side, you know, we're kind of looking for some little shadow divots. Like I can see one maybe right here, just a teeny bit if I'm getting really picky. But for the most part, I would say this cookie is really flat, so the stencil is gonna lay flat on it. This cookie, this will still be fine for airbrushing. It's not like we're gonna have any big problems, but I can see there's a little bit of a divoting right here that maybe I just wanna keep an eye on if I'm doing something like stripes, especially where you want it to be real exact. So take a look at your flood icing. If your flood icing has a lot of hills and valleys in it, it's just gonna make it that much harder for you to get a clean airbrushing result. And basically that's because the stencil needs to touch the cookie and lay as flat as possible. Okay, so I've loaded our narrow stripe stencil into the stencil genie. So when you lay your stencil over your cookie, the stencil needs to be touching the surface, and it should be hopefully tight to the top of the cookie. So you may need to experiment with which side or which thickness gives you a better fit, and you can feel it kind of by touching it and seeing if there's any movement in the stencil, like does it have to be pressed down to get to the cookie. If I change this one, remember where I pointed out that tiny little like valley? I can feel it a little bit. It's not bad, but if your cookie has if your flood icing on your cookie is not real smooth, that's where you're gonna just have more challenges on stenciling. So again, the cookie needs to be, if it's royal icing, it needs to be crusted, dried to work on. You can also do this on fondant. Obviously fondant, you can roll it out, attach it to your cookie, and use it right away. Same things apply though. Your stencil still needs to be touching the fondant. Everything else is the same, but you don't have to wait for it to dry. So I want to show you from the side view what this looks like. And forgive me if it's a little shaky, I'm holding it with my hand. But see how our stencil is quite tight to the cookie, all in the middle. But see how on the edge it's a little bit up off the cookie. This might happen, and this kind of happens to me a lot, where my icing is a little bit taller in the middle than on the edges. It's not a big deal, but I just want to point it out. If you feel like, well, my icing looks great in the middle, but the edges are always blurry, that's going to be why, is that the stencil is not really making good contact on the edge. And I'm going to show you how you can deal with that when I show you airbrushing right here. So let's say we're going to do some simple polka dots on the background of our unicorn cookie. I've got my polka dot stencil down. I still have green in here, so we're going to go with the green. I'm going to aim straight down as much as I can at the cookie. I'm using my thumb to pull back the trigger. Some people use their forefinger or your pointer finger. You can do whatever makes sense to you. For me, I just find it easier with my thumb. And I'm going to aim down, and I'm going to start to pull back just slightly and go slowly and aim it down at those polka dots. I do want to point out, you don't need to take your gun and kind of go crazy. You can be, you know, a little more methodical about this and take your time. Go polka dot by polka dot if you want. This will save you money in that you don't need to use as much color. And how I was pointing out, if the stencil is not super tight in certain areas, using a product like this is a thingamajiggy that we sell. You can use either end. You could use a chopstick, you could use your finger, but maybe put a glove on first. And kind of just hold down that stencil right at that one part to give you a little bit of a tighter fit. And you can do this pretty quickly once you get the hang of it. And go through those polka dots if you see them popping up anywhere. This is also good to use for doing stripes. If you feel like your stripes are not super clean and you're getting underspray. So that's really the basics of airbrushing and airbrushing using a stencil, and you can use the same techniques with any stencil or any airbrush machine. I hope this helps you out, and stay tuned for more videos on how to do stripes and how to do multiple colors and lots more fun things to come. As always, visit thecookiecountess.com for supplies. Feel free to leave a comment with your questions and have fun cooking. Have a great day. Bye.